3 digits, that is all it is. 3 digits between you and the apartment you want. 3 digits between you and the car loan you need. 3 digits between you and the mortgage that would finally get your family out of that rental and into something real. 3 digits. And yet, those 3 digits, that single number, between 300 and 850, have more control over your daily life than almost any decision you will ever make. More than your education. More than your work ethic. More than how honest you are, or how hard you try, or how carefully you live. In America, your credit score is your financial identity. And for millions of Americans, that identity was built or destroyed by a system they never fully understood. A system designed by institutions that profit from confusion. A system that rewards access with more access and punishes exclusion with more exclusion. A system that looks, from the outside, like a simple number, but is, from the inside, one of the most consequential and least explained forces in American economic life. This is the story of James Whitfield, a 34-year-old warehouse supervisor from Memphis, Tennessee. A man who spent 11 years trapped inside a credit score of 521. Unable to rent a decent apartment. Unable to qualify for a car loan without a 28% interest rate. Unable to open a basic checking account at 3 different banks. A man who was told, repeatedly, by the system itself, that he was not creditworthy. That he was a risk. That he was, financially speaking, less than. And a man who, after 11 years of that, finally understood the trap well enough to escape it. This is not just James's story. This is the story of 79 million Americans who currently have credit scores below 670. The threshold most lenders consider fair or poor. 79 million people, nearly 1 in 3 American adults. Living in the same trap, many of them not knowing exactly how they got there, almost none of them knowing exactly how to get out. This is also a story about a system, about how credit scoring works in America, who built it, who benefits from it, and why it was never designed with ordinary people in mind. Because before you can escape a trap, you need to understand exactly how it was built. And this trap, this particular, elegant, self-reinforcing trap, was built carefully, over decades, by people who understood it completely. Let us begin at the beginning. The credit score, as Americans know it today, did not always exist. For most of the 20th century, lending decisions were made by individual bankers who knew their customers personally. You walked into your local bank. The loan officer looked at you, knew your family, knew your employer, knew your reputation in the community, and made a decision based on that knowledge. This system had enormous flaws. It was discriminatory in ways that were obvious and in ways that were invisible. Black Americans, women, immigrants, and anyone outside the social networks of the local banker were systematically denied credit. Not because of financial data, because of bias, because of who the banker knew and liked and trusted. In the 1950s and 1960s, a mathematician named Bill Fair and an engineer named Earl Isaac began working on a different approach, an objective approach, a numerical approach. They believed that if you analyzed enough data about how people repaid loans, you could build a mathematical model that would predict future repayment behavior, without bias, without personal relationships, without discrimination. In 1956, they founded Fair, Isaac and Company, FICO. Their model, refined over decades, became the FICO score, the dominant credit scoring system in America today, used by 90% of the top lenders, consulted in over 10 billion lending decisions every year. The idea was genuinely good. Replace subjective human judgment with objective data. Level the playing field. Give everyone a fair chance based on their actual financial behavior, rather than the color of their skin or the neighborhood they grew up in. That was the vision. The reality turned out to be more complicated, because objective data about financial behavior only exists for people who have been in the financial system. If you have never had a credit card, your behavior with a credit card cannot be measured. If you have never had a bank loan, your behavior with a bank loan cannot be predicted. If you grew up in a community that was historically excluded from banking and lending through redlining, through discriminatory lending practices, through the simple fact of poverty, then you have no data. And no data in the FICO model means no score, which means no access to credit, which means you must go outside the mainstream financial system. 2 payday lenders, 2 renter-owned stores, 2 subprime auto dealers, to every predatory institution that waits at the edges of the system, charging rates that would make a FICO-scored borrower gasp. The solution to discrimination became its own form of exclusion. Quieter, more mathematical, harder to challenge, but just as real. James Whitfield was born into this reality in 1989, South Memphis, Tennessee, a neighborhood that has been for decades one of the most economically distressed urban areas in the United States. His mother, Denise, worked 2 jobs. Daytime cashier at a grocery store on Elvis Presley Boulevard, evening shift at a laundromat on Winchester Road. She worked 45 to 50 hours a week, every week for 30 years. She never complained about it. She was proud of it. She was raising her children and keeping the lights on, and that was enough. James's father left when James was 4. Not dramatically. He simply stopped coming home one Tuesday and never came back. James's grandmother, Cora, said years later, he wasn't a bad man. He just wasn't a staying man. James grew up in a two-room apartment with his mother and his younger sister Keisha. They were not destitute. Denise made sure there was food. She made sure the lights stayed on. She made sure James and Keisha got to school every day. On Christmas morning, there were presents under the tree. Not many, but some. On birthdays, there was a cake. There were small dignities, carefully maintained. But there was never extra. There was never savings. There was never a conversation about credit scores, interest rates, or what a FICO number meant. Because in the world James grew up in, those conversations didn't happen. Not because the adults around him were irresponsible. They were extraordinarily responsible, managing very little money with exceptional care. But because the financial system, credit cards, mortgages, investment accounts, credit scores, had historically excluded communities like his. Decades of redlining had prevented black families from buying homes in appreciating neighborhoods. Decades of discriminatory lending had denied business loans to black entrepreneurs. Generations of policy had deliberately prevented the formation of the generational wealth that funds financial education. When your family has no assets, you don't talk about investing them. When your family has never had a credit card, you don't talk about managing one. When your family has never applied for a mortgage, you don't talk about credit scores. You talk about what you know. You talk about cash. You pay for things in cash or you don't have them. And you raise your children with the same philosophy because it is the only philosophy that has ever been available to you. James graduated from Whitehaven High School in June 2007. He was 18 years old. He was not a bad student. He had a B average and a genuine talent for logistics and organization that his teachers occasionally noted. But college felt impossible. The cost, without a deep understanding of financial aid, felt like a wall he didn't know how to climb. So he didn't try to climb it. He went to work. FedEx Distribution Center, south of the airport. $14 an hour. 5 a.m. shifts. Sorting packages in a vast, cold warehouse. It was physical and demanding and completely unglamorous. James was good at it immediately. He understood systems. He could see inefficiencies in the workflow and fix them. Within 8 months, he had been recognized by his shift supervisor. Within 2 years, he had been promoted to shift lead. By the time he was 23, he was a warehouse supervisor, making $38,000 a year with benefits. By South Memphis standards, by any reasonable measure, he was succeeding. He was doing exactly what he was supposed to do, working hard, advancing through merit, building a life. By the standards of the credit system, he was invisible because James had never had a credit card, never had a car loan, never had a student loan, never had a mortgage. He had paid for everything in cash his entire life, because that was what his mother had taught him and what his community had modeled. And in America, paying for everything in cash means you have no credit history. Not a bad credit history. No credit history. Which, to the financial system, is almost worse. Because no history means no score, and no score means no data. And no data means no way to predict your behavior. And no way to predict your behavior means, in the risk calculus of a lender, maximum risk, which means maximum interest rate. Which means, ironically, that the person who has been most responsible with money, paying cash, never borrowing, never spending more than they have, is treated as less trustworthy than someone who has borrowed extensively and repaid on time. The person who avoided debt is penalized for avoiding debt. This is not a glitch, it is how the system works. The year was 2012. James was 23 years old, and he needed a car. Not a luxury car. A used car. Something reliable enough to get to work at 5 in the morning when the Memphis bus system wasn't running. He had been making it work with the bus for 2 years, borrowing a co-worker's car on weekends, occasionally getting rides, but 2 written warnings for tardiness had made clear that this was not sustainable. He went to a used car dealership on Summer Avenue. He found what he needed, a blue 2008 Chevrolet Impala with 74,000 miles. Asking price, $8,900. He had $2,500 saved. He needed to finance the rest. He filled out the credit application with the confidence of a man who had never done anything financially wrong in his life. He had never missed a payment because he had never had a payment to miss. He had never maxed out a credit card because he had never had a credit card. He was, by every measure of character and behavior, an excellent financial risk. He sat across from the finance manager and waited. The finance manager ran his credit. He came back with the look James would learn to recognize over the next decade. A particular combination of professional sympathy and bureaucratic finality. "You've got no credit history," the manager said. "We can get you approved. But the rate's going to be high, 26.9%. James didn't know, sitting in that chair, exactly what 26.9% meant in dollar terms. He knew it sounded high. He knew it wasn't good. But he didn't know the math. He did the math that night, at his kitchen table. At 26.9% over 48 months on a $6,300 loan, he would pay approximately $4,500 in interest. He would pay $10,800 for a car that cost $8,900. He stared at that calculation for a long time. 120% of the car's value. For the privilege of buying a car, he needed to keep a job he had earned. He signed. Because he needed the car. Because without the car, he might lose the job. And without the job, he had nothing. This is the first gear of the credit trap. The system that is supposed to reward financial responsibility punishes those who have been excluded from the system. You have no credit because you were never given access to credit. So when you finally need credit, you pay the highest possible rate, which means more of your income goes to interest, which means less money to save, which means less financial stability, which makes you a higher risk in the eyes of the same system, which means the next time you need credit, the rate is high again. This is not metaphor, this is mathematics. A self-reinforcing loop designed, not intentionally perhaps, but effectively, to extract more money from people who have less of it. James made his car payments, every single month, on time, for 14 months. He never missed one. He never paid late. His credit score, which had been non-existent, climbed slowly to 612. Not good, but real. A start. Something. And then, in March 2014, James's mother had a stroke. She was 51 years old. She was at work the daytime shift at the grocery store. When it happened, a co-worker called the ambulance. She was in the hospital by noon. She survived. The stroke affected her left side, her speech, her stamina. Recovery would be long and incomplete. The 2 jobs that had kept them afloat for James's entire childhood stopped. No income. James was 24 years old. He began supplementing his mother immediately. $300 the first month, $400 the second. When the medical bills started arriving for the hospitalization, the rehabilitation facility, the ongoing speech therapy, $500, his own budget, which had never had much margin, went negative. In June 2014, for the first time in his life, James was 11 days late on a credit card payment. Not willfully late, not carelessly late, Late because he had been at his mother's side almost every day, because his own finances were under strain, because 11 days slipped by in the fog of a medical crisis. He paid it on day 12, but 11 days late, on a credit card, is reported to the credit bureaus as a delinquency. His score dropped 41 points in a single cycle, from 612 to 571. 41 points for 11 days. James didn't know this had happened for 3 weeks, until he tried to refinance the car loan, and was told his score had dropped significantly. He was stunned. He had missed one payment by 11 days, while supporting his mother through a medical crisis. One time, 11 days, and the system had punished him as if he were a fundamentally different and less trustworthy person. This is the second gear of the credit trap. The system is extraordinarily sensitive to negative events and extraordinarily slow to reward positive ones. A single missed payment, regardless of the reason, regardless of the context, regardless of the 30 payments you made perfectly before it, can drop your score 100 points instantly. Building those points back takes months, sometimes years. And while you are building, every financial interaction costs you more. Higher interest rates, higher deposits, higher insurance premiums. The asymmetry is not accidental. Lenders profit most from borrowers who are just creditworthy enough to qualify, but just risky enough to charge a higher rate. A perfect credit score means the lowest interest rates, less profit for the lender. A very low score means you don't qualify at all. No loan, no profit. The most profitable borrower, from a lender's perspective, sits in the middle, desperate enough to accept whatever rate is offered. Qualified enough to make repayment likely, the system is optimized to keep people in this band, not through conspiracy, through the simple mathematics of profit. James called the credit card company after he discovered the drop. He explained the situation. His mother's stroke, the medical crisis, the 11 days. He asked if the late payment could be removed from his report as a goodwill gesture. The representative was professional and sympathetic. She explained that the company's policy was to report all late payments to the bureaus. She explained that he could submit a written goodwill letter requesting removal. He wrote the letter that week. Careful, specific, honest. 3 weeks later, he received a form letter declining the request. The late payment stayed on his report. For 7 years, that is how long negative items remain on an American credit report. 7 years. James was 20. That late payment would follow him until he was 31. Denise recovered, slowly and imperfectly. She had some lasting weakness on her left side, and her speech remained slightly slurred under stress. But by October 2014, she was back at work. 1 job instead of 2, and part-time, but working. James continued sending money. Less than before, but still something. And he began, carefully and with no real guidance, trying to rebuild. He had read somewhere online that the best way to build credit was to open a credit card and use it responsibly. So he applied for a card, declined. He applied for a different card, declined. He applied for a store card at a furniture retailer. Approved, 31.9% interest, $500 limit. He used it to buy a small television, $340, and paid it off over 3 months. His score went up 6 points. 6 points. 3 months of careful, disciplined use. 6 points. James looked at that number and did some rough arithmetic. To go from 571 to 700, still not excellent, but meaningfully better. He needed to gain approximately 129 points, at 6 points per 3 months of perfect behavior. Assuming nothing went wrong, it would take over 5 years, just from this one card. And that was an optimistic assumption, because things always go wrong. In 2015, his apartment building was sold to a new management company. The company sent letters to all existing tenants. They were reviewing leases and running credit checks. The new minimum threshold was 620. James was at 578 at the time. He received a letter informing him that his lease would not be renewed. 90 days to vacate. He had lived in that apartment for 3 years. He had never been late on rent, not once. But rent payments, in 2015, were not automatically reported to credit bureaus. 3 years of perfect rent meant nothing to the system. A credit score of 578 meant he had to leave. He spent 3 weeks looking for a new place. Most landlords required 600 to 640. Some required higher. He eventually found a landlord willing to accept his score in exchange for a larger deposit. 2 months' rent up front instead of one. $2,080, due immediately. He wiped out most of his savings. He moved into a smaller apartment, further from work, in a less safe neighborhood. This is the third gear of the credit trap. It reaches beyond debt. It reaches into housing, into the physical geography of your life, where you can live. How far you are from work, what your commute costs, how safe your street is, your credit score. A number designed to measure your likelihood of repaying a loan has become a universal measure of your worth as a participant in American society. Landlords use it. Employers use it. Many positions require credit checks, particularly in finance and management. Insurance companies use it to set your premiums. Utility companies use it to determine whether you must pay a security deposit. Cell phone carriers use it for contract eligibility. A number designed to tell banks whether to give you a loan has become a passport. And if your passport is stamped poorly, you are charged more for almost everything. You pay more for car insurance. Credit-based insurance scores are used in most states. You pay more for auto loans. You pay security deposits others don't. You pay higher fees. You are systematically extracted. Not because you are a bad person. Because you are a person the system has decided to extract from. James continued. He paid his bills. He used the furniture store card carefully. He applied for a secured credit card, where you deposit money as collateral against the limit, and used it for small purchases, paying them off monthly. His score climbed, slowly, painfully, slowly. 578, 585, 591, 601. By early 2016, he had crossed 600 for the first time. Progress. And then his car threw a rod. The 2008 Impala, which had 74,000 miles when he bought it, now had 141,000. A rod means the engine is done. Repair estimate $3,200. The car was worth perhaps $2,500 running. It was not worth fixing. He needed a car. His score of 608 at the time qualified him for a slightly better rate than the original, 22.5% instead of 26.9%. Still, nearly 5 times the rate available to someone with excellent credit. He bought a 2011 Ford Focus, $7,400. He financed $5,800 at 22.5% and started over again. By 2017, James had been working on his credit for 5 years. He had made almost every payment on time. He had kept his balances as low as his income allowed. He had not applied for new credit more than necessary. His score, 621. Not bad. Not good either. Still technically fair, which sounds better than it is. Fair credit in America means you qualify for loans, but at rates that can be 2 to 4 times higher than excellent credit rates. Fair credit means you might qualify for an apartment, but you'll pay a larger deposit. Fair credit means you're in the system, just paying a constant premium for the privilege. 5 years of discipline, and he was still paying the premium. Still on the wrong side of a line he couldn't see clearly enough to cross. This is when most people give up. Not with a dramatic decision, just quietly. Just by stopping to try. By accepting that this is simply how things are for people like them. James almost gave up in the summer of 2017. He was 28 years old. He had been at the warehouse for 9 years. 2 promotions, making $44,000 a year. Good money by many measures. Not enough to absorb the constant financial penalty of a below-average credit score. One afternoon, he sat across from his co-worker Marcus in the break room. Marcus was 31. Similar job, similar income. Different background. Grew up in a middle-class family in Germantown. Had his first credit card at 18. Co-signed by his parents. Had been building credit for 13 years. They had recently both bought cars. Same dealership, same month, same model, the Ford Focus. James had financed at 22.5%. Marcus had financed at 4.9%. James was paying $287 a month. Marcus was paying $174 a month. Same car, same dealership, same month. $113 a month difference. $1,356 a year. Over the life of a 5-year loan, $6,780 for the exact same car. James mentioned this to Marcus. Marcus hadn't thought about it before. He looked genuinely troubled. "That's not right," Marcus said. "No," James said. "It's not." He started calculating. Not just the car, everything. Extra cost of high-interest car loans over 6 years. Approximately $6,200. Security deposits above the standard 1 month. Approximately $2,100 across 3 moves. Higher car insurance, due to credit-based insurance pricing, estimated $340 per year over 5 years. $1,700. Higher utility deposits, $400 paid twice. Fees for secured credit cards and credit builder accounts, approximately $600. Conservative total estimate, over $11,000. $11,000, not from spending recklessly, not from borrowing irresponsibly. From navigating a system that charged him more for everything, systematically, because his score was below a threshold. $11,000 extracted from a man who never missed a payment on purpose, never spent beyond his means, never did anything that genuinely deserved financial punishment. He sat with that number, and something shifted. Not the heavy hopelessness he had felt before, something harder, something colder. Something that looked, when he examined it carefully, like determination. "I stopped seeing it as my fault," he told me later. "I started seeing it as a problem to solve, a system to learn, and once you understand a system completely, you can work it. I didn't want to beat the system. I just wanted to stop letting the system beat me." In August 2017, James did something he had never done before. He requested his full credit reports from all 3 bureaus, not just his score, his full reports. Every American is entitled to 1 free full report from each of the 3 major credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, every 12 months. The official site is annualcreditreport.com. This is mandated by federal law. Most Americans have never used it. James had never used it. He requested all 3. He printed them out, 47 pages total, and spread them across his kitchen table. He looked at the raw data of his financial life. Every account, every balance, every payment history, every inquiry, every address on record. He read every line. It took 3 hours, and what he found shocked him. Not because it was worse than expected, because some of it was wrong. On his Equifax report, a collection account from a medical provider, $340. He had no memory of this bill. He had moved apartments 18 months earlier, and the bill had apparently been sent to his old address. He had never received it. He had never known it was in collections. It had been sitting there for 2 years, dragging his score down, without his knowledge. On his TransUnion report, a credit card account listed as charged off, belonging to someone named James A. Whitfield. James's middle initial is not A. He had never opened this account. Someone, possibly with a similar name, possibly through error, possibly through fraud, had an account on his report. On his Experian report, his address was listed with a variation that had caused 2 of his positive payment accounts to appear in a slightly separate profile, not fully merged with his main report. 2 accounts where he had made every payment on time, not counted toward his primary score. 3 errors on 3 separate reports, affecting the number that determined where he could live, what he paid for insurance, and what interest rates he qualified for. A Federal Trade Commission study has found that 1 in 5 Americans has an error on at least one of their credit reports. 1 in 5, that is approximately 65 million Americans, walking around with incorrect information determining their financial access. Most of them don't know, because most of them never look. James looked. He did not panic. He got organized. He created a folder for each bureau, one physical, one digital. He drafted dispute letters, formal, specific, documented. For Equifax, a dispute of the medical collection he had never received notice of, with a written explanation and a request for verification that he had ever been notified of the debt. For TransUnion, a dispute of the fraudulent account, with a request to flag the account for fraud investigation and remove it from his report. For Experian, a dispute of the address discrepancy and a request that all accounts under variations of his name and address be properly merged into his primary profile. He sent all 3 letters by certified mail. He kept copies. He noted the dates. Under the Fair Credit Reporting Act, federal law, credit bureaus have 30 days to investigate a dispute and respond. Day 31, Equifax responded. The medical collection had been investigated. The creditor could not provide documentation that James had been properly notified of the debt. The collection was being removed from his report. Day 34, TransUnion responded. The account attributed to James A. Whitfield had been flagged and was under investigation. It was being marked as disputed on his report, pending investigation. Day 41, Experian responded. The address had been corrected. The accounts that had been appearing in a secondary profile were being merged into his primary report. James checked his scores 2 weeks later. Equifax, up 38 points. TransUnion, up 22 points, with a note that the fraud investigation was continuing. Experian, up 44 points. His average score had moved from 621 to 693. In 6 weeks, not because his behavior had changed, not because he had paid off debt, not because anything real about his financial life had changed, because wrong information had been removed from his report. He sat at his kitchen table and looked at those numbers for a long time. 38 points, 22 points, 44 points. Points he had been missing for years. Points he had been paying for in higher interest rates and larger deposits and rejected applications for years. Gone because he had finally looked corrected, because he had exercised a legal right that most people don't know they have. I cried, he told me. Not sad crying. Something between angry and grateful, because I thought about all the years, all the payments I made on time, all the apartments I couldn't get, all the extra interest I paid. And I thought, what if I had done this 5 years ago? What would my life have looked like if I had known to look? He allowed himself that thought for one night, and then he went back to work, because his score was now 693, and he wanted to push it further. And now, for the first time, he understood enough to know how. He spent the following months studying the credit scoring system with the focus he had once applied to the warehouse workflows that had earned him 2 promotions. He bought 2 books on credit repair and financial systems. He found online communities of people who had rebuilt their credit forums where people shared strategies, celebrated milestones, debated approaches. He read the actual FICO scoring methodology. Not all of it is public, but enough is disclosed to understand the 5 key factors. He was building a map of the system. Payment history, 35% of the score. The most important factor by far. Late payments are catastrophic. On-time payments build slowly but consistently. This was James's strongest area now. 2 years of clean payment history. Credit utilization, 30%. The ratio of credit card balances to credit limits. The higher the ratio, the worse the score. Above 30% begins to hurt significantly. Above 50% hurts substantially. Above 80% is very damaging. Below 10% is ideal for maximum scoring benefit. This was James's problem area. His total available credit was $2,700. His total balance was $1,620. His utilization was 60%, way too high. Length of credit history, 15%. The average age of all open accounts. The older your accounts, the better. This is why closing old credit cards, even unused ones, hurts your score. Closing an old card reduces the average age and reduces available credit, both of which hurt the score. James's oldest account was his car loan from 2012, 5 years old at this point. moderate, credit mix, 10%. Having both revolving credit cards, which carry varying balances, and installment loans, car loans, mortgages with fixed monthly payments improves your score. James had 2 credit cards and a car loan. Decent mix, new credit inquiries, 10%. Every time you apply for new credit, a hard inquiry is placed on your report. Applying for too many things in a short period signals financial desperation. Each inquiry temporarily drops the score a few points. James had 3 hard inquiries from the past year, slightly high. He now had a complete diagnosis, and a diagnosis allows a prescription. He addressed each factor systematically. Utilization. He called his credit card company and requested a credit limit increase. He had 2 years of on-time payments. They approved an increase from $800 to $2,200. His utilization dropped from 60% to 22% in one phone call. His score gained 19 points. He called the second card and made the same request. Approved from $500 to $1,200. Utilization dropped further. Another 8 points. Payment history. He set up automatic minimum payments on every account, so that late payments became mechanically impossible. Then paid the balances manually above the minimum. If the automatic payment cleared, he was never late. Even if he forgot. Even during a crisis. Rent reporting. He found a service called Rental Karma that would report his monthly rent payment to the credit bureaus for a small monthly fee. He had been paying rent on time for 7 years. None of it had ever appeared on his credit reports. Rent is not automatically reported. He enrolled. Within 60 days, his rent payment history began appearing as a new positive account on his reports. Improving his payment history. Improving his length of credit history. Another 12 points. Collections. He addressed the remaining collection, a small medical bill from 2016, that he had known about but been unable to pay. He called the collection agency. He asked whether they would accept a pay for delete arrangement, meaning he would pay the full amount in exchange for removal of the account from his credit report. The collection agency agreed. He paid $280. The collection was deleted. Another 16 points. Length of history. He kept his oldest accounts open and active. The secured card he had opened in 2014, now 3 years old, he kept open and used it once a month for a tank of gas. Paid it off immediately. Kept the account alive. Kept the average age of accounts growing. By March 2018, 7 months after he first pulled his reports, James Whitfield's credit score was 741, from 521, where it had sat, trapped, for years, to 741. In 7 months of focused, informed action. Not by earning more money, not by dramatically changing his spending, by understanding the system, by identifying errors and correcting them, by applying specific levers to move a specific number. And the number moved. In April 2018, James applied for an apartment, a 2-bedroom in Midtown Memphis. New construction, good neighborhood. A building he had passed many times in the preceding years, had briefly considered, and had dismissed because he knew he wouldn't qualify. He submitted the application. Credit score, 741. The building's threshold, 680. He cleared it with 61 points to spare. No additional deposit required. Standard lease. He signed on April 15th and moved in on May 1st, 2018. He stood in the empty living room for a long time before he started unpacking. He had a view of a small courtyard with a magnolia tree. He stood at the window and looked at it. He said later, it was just an apartment. But it wasn't just an apartment. It was proof that the number I had been carrying for years was not permanent. It was not who I was, it was a measurement. And measurements can change. In August 2018, his Ford Focus needed repairs that cost more than the car was worth. He went to a dealership. He showed them his score of 741. They offered him their best available rate, 4.9%. He financed $9,000 on a 2016 Honda Civic. Monthly payment, $169. He called Marcus from the dealership parking lot. 4.9, he said. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Same as me, Marcus said. Same as you, James said. In 2019, James spoke to a mortgage broker for the first time. He had been thinking about this for a while. He was 30 years old. His score was 758. The mortgage broker pulled his report and spent 20 minutes reviewing it. She told him he was pre-approved for up to $220,000 at a fixed rate of 4.2%. He thanked her and called his sister Keisha. He told her. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Mama is going to cry." He closed on a house on November 8, 2019. A 3-bedroom in Whitehaven. Not the most expensive neighborhood. Not the trendiest, but a real house in the community where he had grown up. A house on a street he had known since childhood. A house that needed some work and that he intended to give it. He sat on the front porch on the first night with a beer and looked at the street. The same street where he had ridden his bike as a kid. The same corner where his mother used to wait for the bus. He owned something here now. Not the bank, not a landlord. Him, this was his. Let me give you the full accounting. From 2012 to 2018, 6 years, James paid an estimated $11,000 in excess costs attributable directly to his low credit score. Extra interest on auto loans compared to prime rate, approximately $6,200. Security deposits above standard, approximately $2,100 across 3 moves. Higher insurance premiums, approximately $1,700 over 5 years. Utility deposits paid unnecessarily, $400. Credit builder product fees, approximately $600. Total, just over $11,000. Extracted from a man who was doing everything right by every standard of character, who worked full-time and then more than full-time, who supported his family through a medical crisis, who paid what he owed, who simply had the wrong number, and did not yet know enough to change it. Now I want to give you what James wanted you to have. Not inspiration, not motivation. Specific, actionable knowledge. The kind of knowledge that costs $11,000 to acquire the hard way. The kind he is giving you right now, for free. Step 1. Pull your full credit reports. Go to annualcreditreport.com. This is the only federally mandated free report site. Not Credit Karma. Not any other service. Annualcreditreport.com. Request your report from all 3 bureaus. Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. You are entitled to 1 free report from each every 12 months. That law is called the Fair Credit Reporting Act, and it exists specifically to protect you. Use it. Print the reports or save them as PDFs. Read every single line, every account, every balance, every payment history entry, every inquiry, every address. Look for accounts you do not recognize. Look for addresses that are not correct. Look for balances that do not match what you know. Look for late payments on accounts you know you paid on time. Look for collection accounts you were never notified of. 1 in 5 Americans has an error on at least 1 report. You may be one of them. The only way to know is to look. Step 2. Understand and manage your utilization. Add up all your current credit card balances. Add up all your current credit card limits. Divide your total balances by your total limits. If the result is above 30%, your utilization is hurting your score significantly. 2 ways to fix this: pay balances down or increase your limits. Paying down is better for your finances. Requesting a limit increase is faster for your score. Most card companies will approve a limit increase if you have 12 months or more of on-time payments. Call and ask. It takes 10 minutes. It can move your score 10 to 30 points. Step 3. Dispute every error you find. Every single one. Write a formal dispute letter to the Bureau, reporting the error. Be specific. State the account name, account number, the error, and what the correct information should be. Include copies, not originals, of any documentation you have. Send by certified mail with return receipt. Keep copies of everything you send. Note the date you send each letter. The Bureau has 30 days to investigate and respond. If they do not respond in 30 days, the item must be removed. If they respond and refuse to correct a legitimate error, you can escalate to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. You have legal rights in this process. Exercise them. Step 4. If you pay rent on time, make it count. Rent is not automatically reported to credit bureaus, but services like Rental Karma, Rent Track, Level Credit, and Experian Rent Bureau can report your rent payments for you. Some are free, some charge a small monthly fee. If you have been paying rent on time for months or years, that history can begin appearing on your credit report. Adding positive payment history. Adding account age, it takes 60 to 90 days to appear, but it builds from there. Step 5. Do not close old accounts. This is one of the most common mistakes people make. You pay off a credit card and feel a surge of satisfaction and close the account. It feels like you are done with debt. But closing the account hurts you in 2 ways. It reduces your total available credit, which raises your utilization ratio. It eliminates the account's history from your average account age calculation. Both hurt your score. Keep old accounts open. Use them for small purchases every few months. A tank of gas, a grocery run. Pay them off immediately. Keep the account active and alive. Step 6. Build a credit mix if you don't have one. If you only have credit cards, consider a credit builder loan from a credit union. These are small loans, often $500 to $1,000, where the money is held in a savings account while you make payments. At the end of the loan term, you receive the money. The payment history is reported to the bureaus throughout. It builds your payment history and adds an installment loan to your credit mix. Many credit unions and community banks offer them. Step 7. Space out credit applications. Every hard inquiry temporarily drops your score. A single inquiry costs you 2 to 5 points. Multiple inquiries in a short period can cost 20 to 30 points. Do not apply for new credit more than once every 6 months unless necessary. If you need to shop for rates for a mortgage or car loan, do it within a focused window of 14 to 45 days. Multiple mortgage or auto loan inquiries within this window are counted as a single inquiry by FICO. They know you are shopping, not desperate. Step 8. Be patient and protect what you have built. Negative items take 7 years to fall off your report. Positive items build slowly. This is a long game, but every month of on-time payments is a month of improvement. Every year of good history is a year of evidence. Every point you gain is $1 a month you stop losing to excess interest. The math works in your favor once you understand it. Once you are no longer paying the invisible tax. And finally, the thing James said that I want you to carry with you. He said, the credit score system is not fair. I want to be completely honest about that. It was not designed with communities like mine in mind. It does not account for the ways poverty compounds itself. It punishes people for circumstances that were not their choice. It rewards people who already had access to credit for having used that access well. It is not a measure of character. It is not a measure of intelligence, or work ethic, or integrity. It is a measure of how well you have navigated a particular system, and systems can be learned. Systems can be worked. Knowing that, really understanding that the score measures system navigation, not human worth, is the first step toward navigating the system better. I'm not asking you to love it. I'm not asking you to think it's fair. I'm asking you to understand it. Because understanding it is how you stop paying the tax. Understanding it is how you get the apartment. Understanding it is how you get the 4.9% rate instead of the 22.5%. Understanding it is how you sit on the porch of your own house in your own neighborhood and feel something that has no exact name, but is the closest thing to financial peace that I have ever felt. Not because the system deserves your effort, but because you deserve the life on the other side of it. 3 digits, that is all it is. And now you know exactly how those 3 digits work. What moves them, what damages them, what can be corrected, what can be built. Go to annualcreditreport.com this week. Pull all 3 reports. Read every line. Start there. The life on the other side of this number is waiting for you. This has been the Credit Score Trap. How millions of Americans are financially paralyzed. A true story, a real system, and a way out. Thank you for listening. If this episode gave you something, one fact, one action, One moment of recognition that you are not as alone in this as you thought. Please subscribe to Broke to Built USA. Because there are more stories coming. Real ones, American ones. About the systems that shape our financial lives and the people who learned to navigate them anyway. New episode every week. We will see you in the next one. I want to stop here and go deeper. Because James's story is real, and James's outcome is real. But James is one person. And I want you to understand the full scale of what we are talking about. Because the credit trap does not affect one man in Memphis. It affects tens of millions of Americans, in ways that compound across generations. In ways that shape entire neighborhoods and cities, and the distribution of wealth in this country. Let me give you some numbers. As of the most recent data available, approximately 79 million Americans have credit scores below 670. That is the threshold most lenders consider fair, the line between access to mainstream financial products and the shadow economy of high-cost lending. Of those 79 million, approximately 45 million have scores below 600. That is poor credit. People in this category pay an average of $30,000 to $40,000. More over there, lifetime and excess interest costs compared to people with excellent credit. Not because they borrowed more, because they borrowed the same and paid more for it. Think about what $30,000 to $40,000 means. That is a down payment on a house. That is 4 years of a child's college tuition at a state university. That is a retirement account with a decade of compound interest, extracted, not through theft, not through fraud. Through the ordinary mechanics of a credit system that charges more to the people who can least afford it. There is a term for this in academic economics. The poverty premium, the additional cost in interest rates, fees, deposits, insurance premiums, and missed opportunities that comes with being poor in America. The poverty premium is not unique to credit. Poor Americans pay more for groceries because they live in food deserts, where the only options are convenience stores. Poor Americans pay more for transportation because they cannot afford reliable cars and must take buses that take twice as long. Poor Americans pay more for housing in rent, relative to income, because they cannot access mortgage markets. And poor Americans pay more for credit because their credit scores are lower. Because their scores are lower, in part, because they were excluded from the system. Because they were excluded in part because of policies that have nothing to do with individual character or behavior. This is the machine. James spent 11 years inside it. Most people spend their entire lives inside it. And never fully understand that the machine itself, not their behavior, is the primary cause of their financial position. I want to tell you about 3 people James met in the online forums he found in 2017. 3 people who were, in different ways, navigating the same system. The first was a woman named Caroline, 53 years old, Chicago, Illinois. She had worked as a licensed practical nurse for 25 years. She had a credit score of 488. Not because she had been irresponsible. Because she had been sick. In 2011, she was diagnosed with breast cancer, surgery, chemotherapy, radiation, 18 months of treatment, during which she could not work full-time, during which her income dropped, during which her medical bills accumulated to over $140,000, most of which insurance did not fully cover, during which she missed credit card payments and eventually defaulted on a personal loan. She recovered from the cancer. She did not recover from the credit damage for years. By 2017, she was working again, full-time, making $61,000 a year. Excellent employment history, solid income, and a credit score of 488. That meant she was denied a mortgage, paying premium rates for her car insurance, and unable to refinance the high-interest medical debt that was still consuming a significant portion of her income. She had done nothing wrong. She had gotten sick. And the credit system does not care why you missed payments. It records that you missed them, and charges you accordingly for the next 7 years. The second person was a man named Roberto, 29 years old, Phoenix, Arizona. He had immigrated from Mexico at 21, legally, on a work visa. 8 years in the United States, 8 years of working construction. 8 years of paying taxes. 8 years of paying cash for everything. Rent, groceries, transportation, because he had no social security number for the first 3 years, and no access to mainstream banking. By the time he had his green card and his social security number at 24, he was effectively starting over financially. No credit history, invisible to the system. He applied for his first credit card. Rejected, he applied for a secured card. Approved at 34% interest, with a $300 limit. He used it carefully. By 29, with 5 years of careful effort, his score was 634. Enough to rent an apartment without a double deposit. Not enough for a mortgage. Not enough to get a car loan under 20%. 8 years in America. 5 years of deliberate credit building. And still paying premiums. Because the system gives no credit, literally no credit, for the years before you entered it. The years you worked. The years you paid. The years you were building a life that just happened to be invisible to a particular computer model. The third person was a young woman named Destiny, 22 years old, Atlanta, Georgia. She had grown up in a household where her mother had declared bankruptcy when Destiny was 16. Her mother had tried to add Destiny as an authorized user on a credit card before the bankruptcy, meaning Destiny's name appeared on an account that subsequently went through bankruptcy proceedings. Destiny had never used the card. She hadn't even known she was on it. But the bankruptcy appeared on her credit report. At 18, before she had ever applied for a single financial product. She spent 2 years disputing it. It was eventually removed, but during those 2 years, every financial decision she made was colored by a bankruptcy that was not hers. She learned about the Fair Credit Reporting Act. She learned about the dispute process. She got it removed, but she lost 2 years. 2 years of credit history she could have been building. 2 years of her early financial life, gone because of an error she had no part in creating. 3 people, a cancer survivor. An immigrant, a young woman inheriting a mistake. None of them irresponsible. All of them paying the premium. James met them in the forums. He read their stories and recognized his own. Not in the specific details, but in the shape of it. The shape of a system that extracts from those who can least absorb extraction, and that offers the most to those who already have the most. He told me, before I understood the system, I thought my score was a judgment of who I was. A score of 521 meant I was a 521 kind of person. That I was less reliable, less trustworthy, less. After I understood it, I saw it differently. My score was a measurement of how much access I had been given, and how well I had managed what little I had. That is a very different thing. And once I understood that, once I stopped taking it personally and started treating it like a problem in logistics, everything changed. He was a warehouse supervisor. He understood logistics. He understood systems. He understood that a bottleneck in a system is not a moral failure. It is a design problem. And design problems have solutions. I want to talk about something that most credit repair discussions skip. The emotional dimension. Because the credit trap is not only financial, it is psychological. Living with a low credit score in America means living with a constant ambient sense of financial failure. Even when you have done nothing wrong. Even when you are working hard and paying what you owe and making responsible decisions, the rejected applications, the higher deposits, the look on the finance manager's face, the quiet moment when you don't apply for something, don't even try, because you already know the answer. This is corrosive in ways that compound the financial damage. Because the psychological weight of financial shame can lead to avoidance, and avoidance makes things worse. You don't open the credit card statements. You don't check the reports. You don't apply for the apartment you want because you're afraid of the rejection. You don't call the collection agency because you don't know what to say. You avoid, and the avoided problems grow. James avoided for years. He told me. I knew generally that my credit was bad, but I didn't know specifically. I didn't know which accounts, which errors, which factors. I just had a vague sense of damage, and that vague sense felt too big to confront. It wasn't until I sat down with the actual reports, all 47 pages, that I realized the damage was specific, finite, addressable. A vague sense of damage is overwhelming. A specific list of problems is a to-do list. This is why pulling the reports is the most important first step. Not because the number on the report is your destiny, but because the specific information on the report is actionable. Errors can be disputed. Collections can be negotiated. Utilization can be reduced. Old accounts can be kept open. Rent can be reported. Each item on the list can be addressed, one at a time. Over months, the mountain becomes a series of steps. The steps are climbable. James climbed them. And now I want to talk about what life looks like on the other side. Because this story does not end with a credit score of 741. It continues. In 2020, James refinanced his mortgage. Interest rates had dropped significantly. His score had continued to improve. By this point, it was 771. He refinanced from 4.2% to 2.9%. On a $200,000 mortgage, the difference was approximately $140 a month, $1,680 a year. Over the remaining 28 years of the mortgage, at the new rate, approximately $47,000 in interest savings. $47,000 from one refinancing decision, made possible by a credit score that had been rebuilt from 500. In 2021, he began rehabbing the house. New roof, updated kitchen, new flooring throughout. He did much of the work himself. He had inherited some of Robert's practical skills, learned the rest from YouTube. He hired contractors for the electrical and plumbing. He financed part of the renovation through a home equity line of credit, available to him because he had built equity in the house, and his credit score qualified him for a reasonable rate, 6.1%, not the best, but legitimate, mainstream, not a payday loan, not a rent-to-own scheme, not a predatory product, a mainstream financial product at a rate that made the renovation affordable. In 2022, he began thinking about his sister. Keisha was 29 years old. She was renting. She had a credit score of 598. She had made some of the same mistakes James had made at her age. A missed payment during a rough stretch. A collection account from a medical bill she hadn't known about. And the same foundational problem, limited access to credit in her younger years. Building a thin file that left her vulnerable to every small setback. James sat down with her at his kitchen table. His kitchen table in his house, the house he owned. And he walked her through everything he knew. The full reports, the dispute process, the utilization math, the rent reporting, the old accounts, the secured card strategy, all of it. In 6 months, Keisha's score was 651. In a year, it was 689. She applied for a mortgage pre-approval in the spring of 2023. She was approved. She bought a house 4 miles from James's house, in the same neighborhood where they had both grown up. 2 children of a woman who worked 2 jobs her whole life, who had never owned anything. Now both homeowners on the same street. When Mama came to Keisha's closing, James told me she cried the whole time. Not sad crying, the other kind. The kind where something has been waiting to come out for a long time and finally finds a reason to. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "The credit system is not fair. I have said that. I believe it. But what I also believe is that understanding an unfair system well enough to navigate it is a form of power. Not the power to change the system that takes policy and time and collective action, but the power to stop being consumed by it. The power to stop paying the tax. The power to build something your children can inherit. My mother didn't have that knowledge. Her mother didn't have it. Maybe their mothers didn't either. But I have it now, and Keisha has it. And I am telling you. So now you have it too. That is how it spreads. Not through policy alone. Through people telling each other the truth about the system and how to navigate it. 3 digits. That is all it is. But behind those 3 digits is a system with rules. Rules that can be learned. Errors that can be corrected. Levers that can be pulled. Traps that can be escaped. Go to annualcreditreport.com. Pull all 3 reports. Read every line. Look for errors. Dispute what is wrong. Manage your utilization. Keep your old accounts open. Report your rent. Be patient. Be persistent. And know, really know, in the way that James knows it now, that the number does not define you. You define the number. This has been the Credit Score Trap. How millions of Americans are financially paralyzed. Thank you for staying until the end. New stories every week on Broke to Built USA. We will see you in the next one.